Well, Wesley, thanks so much for taking a few minutes to chat.
Absolutely. It's good to be here.
Yeah.
Or to be interviewing for sure.
Yeah. So tell me about how long you've been attending Westwood and participating in the Loft. Give me a little bit about that background.
Yeah. So I started going to the Loft at the end of, what was it, 2013? Just a few months after I'd moved to the LA area.
Okay.
And I've been there ever since. I spent some time visiting some other churches, and then really I visited the Loft once. And even though I live in Pasadena and it felt like I was traveling forever to get to the West
Yeah,
Side
yeah.
that first time, I knew that it's where I wanted to be. And so it's never, from then on, it's never really felt like a chore to drive over, just something that I look forward to every Sunday morning.
Okay. Where did you move from?
I was living in Iowa. So I was there for
Wow.
6 years. I went to undergrad there, and then I came back to California, to Pasadena, to attend Fuller. And that's how I sort of got connected. But I grew up in San Diego.
Oh, okay.
California native, who spent a little time outside of this wonderful state.
Yeah, Iowa. Wow, that's a big difference.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's great. Did you graduate from Fuller?
No, so I was going to Fuller, and then it really felt like it wasn't the path that I want to go on. And so I'm glad I figured that out early on, instead of like getting through the program or being deeper into it and realizing this isn't sort of where my heart is. And so I withdrew and have been just sort of like living in LA, sort of as a 28-year-old, I guess now.
Yeah, yeah. Well, so what do you do with your time outside of the Loft and just kind of day-to-day life?
Yeah, so I work for Performing and Visual Arts University, Cal Arts up in Valencia. I've been there about as long as I've been in California, and so that's what pays the bills. But outside of that, I work with a food organization here in Pasadena that works with food allergies, to sort of create open tables for people who may be hosting friends who don't have food allergies or who have food allergies, or for people who have them. It was started by a friend of mine who felt that there were few places that she could go where the lowest common denominator fit her dietary restrictions. And so she started a company and a product line that caters to that specifically. And so I work with her and that team when I'm not at work, when I'm not at CalArts. But also I do a lot of stuff with the Loft, whether it be organizing volunteers or going out with different friends from the Loft. There's also another organization here in Pasadena that I volunteer with, a film festival that the Loft was a sponsor for. So I kind of keep busy with a few things here and there, and I definitely enjoy it.
Yeah, tell me more about your participation in the Loft. You started attending, and now you're a leader in the Loft. How did that come about?
So when I left Iowa, I had spent 6 years at a church, various sort of roles, but never really diving in, because I always felt that I was going to be here for a little bit and then move on to something else. And I think that was an incorrect approach that I see now, because there was so much that I could have done had I just jumped in from the beginning, instead of thinking, oh, I'll be here for 3 years or 4 years and then I'll leave. And so when I found the Loft, after attending a couple months, I was like, no, this place that feels like home. And so I want to be involved in whatever way I can. And I think it was like that February or March, Bo and Chris asked me if I wanted to, be a little more involved in leadership. And I said yes. And so that started with a little bit of meetings with some of the people there. But then we saw a need to get more people involved, whether it be through scripture, through prayer, through announcements. And so I just started like recruiting people and saying, hey, we've got these things. Would you be interested in reading prayer? Reading a prayer, or doing a prayer on Sunday, or reading scripture. And sort of that just became a de facto thing that I started doing. And then, because at the beginning, it's hard to sort of get volunteers, I was doing a lot of prayer, I was doing a lot of reading, I was doing announcements. And then being that face for that person who helps people get into it.
Sure.
And so when we rolled out the small groups, I sort of helped sort of think about how we wanted to do that. I was there sort of in those conversations. And then after we had the consultants come in, and they said there's a sort of a gap in between how we do church and sort of how we welcome them in, but then bring them into a living room space and don't host. And so, with their help and with Chris and Bo, we figured out that sort of a connection aspect was necessary. And so I worked to build out those structures, to build those teams, to train those teams. We make coffee at the Loft, but we make it from like whole bean. And so not only did I have to get the teams together, but I also had to train them in like, look, this is whole bean. We're grinding it this way. We're making it this way. Sort of that full process. And so to that end, I wrote out instructions, made a checklist, trained all the individual teams, as well as sort of folded myself into one or two teams. And so just that sort of work. Whenever something felt like was needed, I offered up my time to be able to do that, because it felt like that's something I can do confidently, work with people, rally people. And so I might as well do that for the Loft.
It sounds like you've got skills to not only connect with people and rally them and kind of pull them in, but also administrate the whole process.
Yeah, I'd say I'm pretty organized. I mean, organization is something that I live and breathe. It's a lot of what I do at work, and it's a lot of what I do for the organizations that I volunteer with. So it's a natural extension to sort of give those gifts over to the Loft.
Mm-hmm. What does it mean to you to be a leader in the Loft? Like, meaning, like, how does that impact your faith? How does it impact your own the way that you live life? Like, what's meaningful about your participation in that way?
So I think one of the things that I love about the Loft is just that it's a community where if you try a little bit, you can really get to know everybody. And so to be involved at the leadership level puts me in front of new people. It puts me in front of people who are coming back to the church. And it makes me feel integrated. At one point, now it's a little harder, but at one point, on any given Sunday, I could name everyone in the space. And that's because I'm going up to them and saying, hi, my name is Westley. I know that you've been here for like 3 weeks. Would you like to read a scripture on a Sunday? And so we exchange information. And so when I'm thinking through my week, who should read scripture or who should do prayer, those names are coming through. And so that led to like it's harder now because we've had so many new people coming in, and it takes a little bit to get to know everyone again. But at one point I could name everyone. And so I felt like even though I can't have a conversation with all 60 people on a given Sunday, I know everyone who's here and I feel connected to everyone who's here. And I think that was made possible through the work that I was doing as a leader for the Loft.
Mm-hmm. How would you say that you've grown in your faith since you've been participating in the Loft?
So I think one of the things that the Loft has done is, because it's this space where we don't all have to believe the same thing. We don't all have to practice our faith in the same way. It's really sort of opened up how I understand our call to be a community, and our call to be people of God, to be broader than simply the one organization that you're a part of on a Sunday morning, but to extend that into really every aspect of our life, because all of those people are a part of that community. Even if we don't meet together on Sunday morning, that openness that runs through the entirety of the Loft, and really Westwood United Methodist Church has sort of grown out and sort of blown up a little bit in how I understand and how I interact with everyone else. I think I've also been fortunate to go to like small groups and have how I understand things challenged by the people who are sitting next to me, in a way that hasn't happened in other places.
Give me an example. Give me an example of how that's happened.
So I was at the Pasadena small group a few months ago, and we were talking about sort of a big question of God's omnipotence, and that the question of, actually, what was the other question? Let's go with a different example.
No,
it's complicated to explain. I was out with drinks with a few people from the Loft a couple weeks ago, and we were talking about who God is in relationship to Jesus, and what do we think about Jesus, and how does that affect what we think about God? And sort of, we can get into the sort of the nitty gritty theological stuff about, of the same substance, of different substance. And I think there's plenty of people at the Loft that can go that route. But I think the question that Alex asked me was, if you follow Jesus, and if you believe who Jesus is, then who is God, and how does he relate to that? How does Jesus relate to God? And I think the question was more focused on, Jesus has an understanding of God. Does our understanding of God posit the same thing? Because I sort of think that like God is huge, but to sort of pin it down to 1, 2, or 3, or sort of examples or specifics as to who God is, becomes very complicated, especially when we're thinking, that we exist in a world with a lot of other religions, sisters and brothers in different faiths. But if it doesn't align with what Jesus sort of believes about God, then what does that mean for us?
Interesting. Yeah. So that challenged you as he asked that question.
And so and it's not a question that I've been asked, because once you step out of sort of a more rigid structure of faith, those questions become possible. Because
awesome.
God is everywhere, God is everything, God is all powerful, God is all knowing. Like those sort of staples become, you have to wrestle with deeper questions and more nuanced questions. And I think that's some of the stuff that I've encountered from the openness of the Loft and Westwood United Methodist Church.
If somebody isn't involved in leadership or volunteering, no matter what gathering they participate in, the Loft or the sanctuary, why would you encourage them to get involved and participate?
I think sort of putting some action behind the words that you say on a Sunday morning is important. But I think more than anything, there's a lot of value in the community beyond simply being there on Sunday. Getting involved in the different aspects, whether it be one of the ministries that we do, one of the service projects that we have on campus. There's a real sort of I don't know a lot of people in the sanctuary, but I've gotten to know them more as I do more and more things where we're all together. In the same way, we talk and have conversations at the Loft, but there's been so many times where I've encountered people who've been there for the same amount of months, and they've met once, and they may not even know each other's names. And so you can have these deep personal conversations about very specific and nuanced things at the Loft, but you've exchanged your name once at the beginning. And so though your name and who you are gets overshadowed by the content of what you talk about. So I've had people tell me I know very personal things about a lot of people that we've expressed and that I've expressed, but I keep forgetting their name because we say it once. And so to get involved is to be more connected on that personal name basis with the people around you. And so it takes the two for me. It's that sort of intentional conversation, but also that interaction in a team, as part of the hospitality team, where you've got 4 people that you work with on every so often. And you obviously, when you arrive, you say hi again, and you get to know people's names again, and then you make coffee together, and then you light candles together. Or if you're on Connection, you greet people together, and in the meantime, while people are arriving, you're talking to the person.
That's interesting. Yeah, that's interesting, because you're bringing to the fact that if we just have surface level conversation, there's not the depth of the relationship. But if you're talking about just these deep things, either personally or theological, there's something missing on that just social interaction level.
Yeah. And that's hard because it's I don't want to elevate just the superficial social aspect.
Yeah,
of
of course. Yeah.
But when we focus on the deep, this part sometimes goes away, and it's oh, I know so much about you, but I forget your name.
Yeah. Yeah. Very fascinating. That's great. Well, Wesley, thank you for just expressing some of those thoughts and your participation, your learnings. So it's great that people will be able to take from that. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah.